Good afternoon. I will certainly refer to what Paolo Capra said. This is something that you know. I'm not talking about the product of Ever. I'm talking about the yeasts in general. In the minutes that I was allotted, I will be talking about a couple of things. It will all begin with a question: how many people, more or less, know in detail what lies behind a yeast product? Because this is a product which is ultimately used in the winery, of course, but behind it there are lots of people, skill sets, materials, kilometers driven. So lots of things that have to come together providing the right level of synergy, which is complex and sensitive, and it's basically the same idea as winemaking. So everything that you can think of in terms of complexity of making wine lies behind the production of winemaking yeasts. There has to be a method, there have to be a chain of activities. There has to be a chain of activities that will bring the user a product that has characteristics and abilities and qualities that are as suitable as possible. I will be describing a management method where yeast was taken as a model, but then the same methodology can be extended to everything else that is used to make wine. So the system that we developed aimed at creating a chain of knowledge and expertise. In other words, a chain of successes that would lead to the satisfaction of the product's users. Now, behind that package, you see the supply chain, which is managed, and that involves all the activities that contribute to the creation of a good or a service, beginning with the raw materials, the assembly, the manufacturing, storage, monitoring, management of the orders, distribution, shipment, and after sales. So what's the mission that we gave ourselves with our partners in the same project? The mission, or mission impossible, which can become possible, is to match demand and supply. What each element, what each link in the supply chain is asking for, in other words, and what each link in the supply chain can provide. So bringing the two together. When we started thinking of how we should organize this management model, we clearly identified a few principles, the basic principles, since we're talking about a chain, which happens to be a supply chain. The main players, the suppliers, distributors, and customers have to share information to whatever extent possible. Customers are in any way the most important link, the final link in the chain, but also the most important. The idea is to always work on the customization of products and services, so everything is geared to finding a specific dedicated application. So a customer-centric approach is of the essence. And in the chain, everybody's a customer and a supplier. And therefore, the streamlining of the supplier pool is essential. And flexibility is also essential. So the focus for us was to make our processes more flexible. But we also put some emphasis onto the creation of new products and services. Now, this pool of people, goods and services is what I termed a community based on knowledge, or knowledge-based community. So whenever we have to provide a product to a customer, we have to deploy all our skills and body of knowledge, beginning with microbiology knowledge, which is all important in the assistance provided to wineries. So the choice of yeast strains are a prerequisite. The product then needs to be streamlined and rationalized, and so you have to combine the knowledge of the product and that of the production technology. And then we need to bring the right product to the customer. So we have to know the market. And last but not least, we have to have winemaking knowledge to customize the application with the goal of providing the highest possible quality of products and or services. To us, that is an objective. Excellence is our objective. This is a flow chart of the many players that come into play, that have a role in the chain and that take part in the making of the finished product that we provided to our customers. We've created a management matrix for all the aspects of the different organizations which are excellence oriented. So we start from understanding the needs of the customer when isolating the right strain and selecting it, and we proceed from that point to the finished product through a number of activities that include, for instance, fine-tuning of the production process, testing of the functional properties of the product. In other words, there's a matrix of activities which is pretty complex, which helps us create a well-manned, continuous flow where sharing information is essential. So we collect customer expectations and translate them into a potential product. Italiana Biotecnologie has all the necessary labs and facilities to collect, test, propagate and characterize the strains. We have a strain library where we test the functional and genetic viability of the strains. We have a lab facility that can develop production protocols, availing ourselves of all the equipment that allow us to develop the project from the identification of the strain to the production line ready strain. So we prepare the protocol, we develop the biomass, be it in a dry or fluid state. We share all these specs at every step of the process, which are not just the specs of the finished product, but also of the production process or processes that may be involved in the making of the finished product, with all the way to the feedback of the final consumer. So in our lab, we can design for excellence, because from the isolation of the strain, we'll work all the through all the production process until we produce a prototype of the product. We are well organized to carry out all the fermentation tests. We do have dryers in our lab to also test the effect of drying. Here you see some of the pieces of equipment where we test initial fermentation. We have a pilot plant which is unique because it's like a miniature winery or a miniature yeast plant with all the necessary fermentation and testing equipment to see how the strains will perform from an operational standpoint and develop all the specs that will have to be transferred to the production plant.
We had then tests to retrieve biomass, I think, of centrifugation, filtering, extrusion filtering. We can therefore study the effects of these production phases on the quality of the end product. We should never forget that production produces yeast, and as such it can have an impact on the quality of the strain. Our goal, therefore, is that of achieving excellence, not only in the specifications of the product, but also in the specifications of the process. And we can devise all the various desiccation elements in order to ascertain what conditions are the best ones to obtain the product in line with what has been requested, and so that performance is at its top. Here we saw a number of pictures of the pilot plant. The goal of this process, which is an operational one, is to have excellence. We have to go beyond minimum standards in order to respect the identity of the product, in order to respect the functional characteristics and the commercial, microbiological, and the product features, so that end users will receive and obtain the quality that they deserve, so that we bring possible defects down to zero, while always abiding by the expectations of the client throughout the supply chain. Prerequisites entail setting up a collection of strains. We need a sort of strain database with elements that are clearly identified and that can be referred back to a specific genotype. We went beyond what is currently known in terms of specifications. We defined quality control criteria and all the analytical aspects. We defined the criterion and criteria for selection of production sites, which means that we know which production sites are best suited for the production of different things. And of course, we focused a lot on the creation of a collection of reference strains, which means that we established this strain database. We characterized the strains from a molecular viewpoint, from a functional viewpoint. We defined all procedures to transfer from the strain to the production site. And we are also working on an information database with all information about the strains and about the genetic features, the functional features of the strain, and so on and so forth. Which means that we have laid the basis to be able to meet all the specifications. Now, I would like to give the floor to Professor Lopreato, who will address us on genetic characterization.